Hi everyone, welcome to Bold as Brass podcast. I'm Melissa Brown, and in this week's episode, I've been chatting with Chris Barrett. Chris is a freelance tuba player based in the UK, and he tells us the differences between studying in the US versus the UK. He tells us all about his involvement with the musicians movement, and we hear all about the Ensemble of the Golden Bough. A huge thanks go to Chris for producing the video for this interview, and a massive thank you to the 1901 Arts Club who hosted us whilst we filmed and recorded this episode. Remember, you can find out about the podcast on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Bold as Brass Podcast, and feel free to reach out to us on those platforms because we do love to hear from our audience. We also have a live Patreon, so if you're interested in showing the podcast some support and helping it keep running, head to patreon.com/Bold as Brass Podcast to find out more. There are behind the scenes bonus content at all tiers, so there's something for everyone. Without further ado, here's this week's episode with Chris Barrett. Hi Chris, thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Bold as Brass.
Hey Mel, great to be here.
I'll let you introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, I'm Christopher Barrett, I'm a tuba player, and I'm the artistic director of Ensemble of the Golden Bough and managing director of Musicians Movement.
I'm
but
so excited.
Really just a tuba player.
At the base of it. Terrible music pun, I apologise. So, we should tell...
Start as we mean to go on.
I know, well, yeah, welcome to interviews with me. So we should, up top, tell everybody, this is the first time that Bold as Brass podcast is interviewing in person. Chris and I are actually in the same room for anyone that's just listening to this, which is super exciting. It's very strange to not have a screen between us.
I know, although there's still a screen there and a screen there, just for posterity.
Yeah, because we are filming this. Anyone that's just listening to it, there's all sorts of extra goodies going on today as well. So, Chris, we'll get stuck into the interview. I like to get everyone to tell me their full life story in this. So we're going to start you right back at the beginning.
Right back at the beginning.
Yeah, what first drew you to play music, and how old were you?
Well, I was 10, and it's hard to say really. I remember that I was in Fresno at the time in California, and the music sort of band director came and he played Pink Panther on the saxophone. I thought that was just about the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. But then for some reason I didn't go for about sort of 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't wander into the band room, and eventually I did. I saw this euphonium in the corner, and I just thought, that's what I want. And I took it home that day, and was playing it, trying to play it. My grandfather showed me that you had to put your lips together. I think he's from the north of England. He always grew up with brass bands, so there was some sort of genetic knowledge that you put your lips together and blew. And I remember telling him that day that that's what I would do for the rest of my life. And I never really looked back. It was sort of love at first sight, really.
That's pretty impressive. And so then how did you start your studies? Was it part of a band program, or did you find a one-to-one teacher, or how did that work?
No, in the States it's all band, and it's amazing really thinking back. The band director will have have the whole band in front of him or her, and it's their job to know all the instruments, all the fingerings, at a basic enough level that they can say to somebody who's a beginner and just sitting in the band, do this. So I sort of learned from the very beginning that you got the book and you worked out the fingerings, and then you learn the band music. And then from the very sort of outset, it was about playing in an ensemble and bringing your part prepared, so that you sort of were able to to contribute in some way. And I very rapidly joined all the possible bands, because you could get out of class. It wasn't. I mean, I always, there were aspects of being in school that I really enjoyed, but nothing as much as music. So I rapidly just joined all of the bands, and then I sort of was caught, being in band when there wasn't any band actually happening. But I was practicing. I wasn't doing anything sort of too cheeky. But I just sort of went straight into it, and I think from probably I had a very good middle school, so they have in California. So sort of year, I don't know what it would be, year 9, year 10, maybe year 8, something like that. You have 2 years. I had a really great middle school band director. It was a little bit whiplash. You know, he would throw chairs and all sorts, but we would always win. You know, the jazz band competitions, and he would stay and just teach me and my friend for 2 or 3 hours after school every day for 2 years.
Wow.
You know, obviously never offered to pay him anything. We were about 11 to 12. Didn't really think about it, but it didn't seem to bother him. You know, he was off the clock. But we would be there, and that sort of band room was sanctuary, really.
That's very sweet. That's really nice. And you say that you fell in love with the euphonium or the tuba pretty much straight away. When you got to the end of school then, did you know what you wanted to do next?
I knew very, very quickly. I think I would have... well, it's worth understanding that I was born in Wirral, actually, and when my mum and my brother and myself left to the States, we moved where my grandparents were, who were sort of, you know, from Lancashire, Cheshire. And my understanding of music was kind of really connected, I suppose, to European classical music from the outset. And I did go to a few concerts. I remember the maths teacher taking me to see Shostakovich 5. And I knew, you know, being in the brass section was something that, you know, was profoundly moving, you know, and just powerful. And really, from as far back as I can remember, I knew I wanted to be, I think I wanted to play euphonium in a band, actually, for a couple of years, because I bought those Royal Northern Wind Band recordings with Timothy Renish. I think it was the first thing I ever bought. I bought the CD at Barnes and Nobles, and then I sort of was rapidly told there are about two or three people in the world who can make a living on euphonium, and I was given a tuba. And I think really from about the age of 12 or 13, I really wanted to go to the Royal College in London or the Royal Northern. But I was convinced that if I could get into the San Francisco Conservatory, which would have one tuba place every 4 years, would open up.
Oh, wow.
You'd only ever have two. And I could get a scholarship to go there that I may be able to transfer onto it later, because there just simply weren't the funds available to come straight back to the UK. So, but really, from as far back as I can remember, it's funny, isn't it, thinking about it now?
Yeah. Amazing. So then you did your studies at the Royal College?
Yes, San Francisco Conservatory for 2 or 3 years.
Okay,
and then I transferred to the Royal College,
came over.
yeah.
Okay, I see. I misunderstood. My apologies.
No, well, it's fairly convoluted, actually, thinking back. But I was very fortunate to get exposed to a number of different traditions.
Sure. And how did you find the two establishments as places to study and play?
Very different. I mean, in San Francisco, I learned the C tuba, the orchestral C tuba, and techniques that I still use today. I'm very thankful for that. But there were other things that were very... there wasn't the same sense of a freelance culture. There wasn't the same sense of the historical context, that even if you don't necessarily discuss it explicitly here, you always find it in the conventions of how we play.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't play Elgar the same way that you would play Beethoven, and you certainly don't play a Mahler symphony or a Stravinsky the same way that the trombonist might do on Mozart or something. In the States, I found, particularly in San Francisco, that they were it was like bigger, better, louder. I had to really learn articulation at the college. Because I listen to all the Philip Jones stuff, and you'll hear them go da 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 da, and they were like, no, you don't articulate like that. And everything was kind of, I didn't even use my tongue for parts of it. They told me not to use my tongue. And so the first year that I was at college, I was sitting with Owen Slade, and he rapidly disabused me of the notion that it was fine to not have a clear articulation or a variety of articulation. And then obviously you're in front of the Albert Hall and the Albert Memorial in Kensington Gardens, and the proms are there, and you just sort of immediately immerse in this ancient, it is quite ancient culture of music in the country, and then also introduced to this very sort of, I think, working class thing, which, with brass playing, which is that you go to the pub, and you buy around, and you be a decent person, and you don't talk music all the time, and you just hang out and just enjoy being around each other. All of those things they're kind of implicit. They're not, they were never sort of stated obviously, but they're things that are quite obvious. San Francisco didn't have that same, as a wonderful, classical music culture and a wonderful culture generally. It's a very old city, but it didn't have those aspects of brass playing and music making that are unique to the UK and particularly to London.
Amazing. Fascinated by, and I say this as well when I talk to people on the continent, just how different playing is in different parts of the world that I guess hadn't really considered, having grown up and played just in the UK. Anyway.
Where did you grow up, by the way?
So I grew up in Cambridgeshire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not too far from here really, like in the grand scheme of geography anyway. So nowadays you do a whole bunch of different things.
I do. I'm very greedy, yeah.
Why don't you tell us about the things that you have on your plate, sort of week to week or month to month?
Well, the three main things, the main thing is I am a freelance, tuba player, and I do, orchestral music is kind of my bread and butter. But I was very fortunate to sort of find Oren Marshall, who showed me how to groove, really. I do some trad stuff and some sort of psychedelic electric tuba, and I probably get about 20 to 30% of my income from being called to do that sort of thing. I did Sam and the Womp the other day, Wilderness Festival, that sort of stuff. But really it's about, the main thing I focus on and the fundamentals of my practice are around orchestral tuba playing. But other than that, we also do musicians movement, which is something that myself and Phil Meadows set up at sort of the beginning of lockdown, just to see what we could do to offer some means of getting people together, because obviously we had to be online, and doing something to just highlight the risk to the entire industry that we were facing. It's not as if a lot of us had many savings, and that first couple of months there was not even any indication that there would be that £1.57 billion bailout package, which we take for granted now. So we rapidly grew to about 17,000 members on this Facebook group, and I remember having a question sitting on my sort of dining room table that we were hoping would be asked to the Prime Minister and Prime Minister's questions, and we took the view from the beginning that we didn't want to get involved in the politics of party politics. Sure. We just wanted to get involved in advocating specifically for music. So we found actually a Tory MP who was extremely welcoming and seemed to understand the risk to his local constituency and to his neighbouring constituency, which was Labour, Jason McCartney in Colne Valley. And we heard that statement a week after we'd sort of written it, being read quite sort of forcefully to the Prime Minister and Prime Minister's questions. And I think we contributed, along with the rest of the industry, to some of the bailout package and things like that. And then after that, we would do things like somebody on the forum contacted us about the ISM. I'm a member of the ISM, so is Phil, and said that for some reason the ISM's liability insurance wouldn't cover teaching in homes, I think it was, and that they couldn't get a response from the ISM. To be fair, the ISM was extremely busy at the time, so we were able to take that forum members' concerns straight to them and say, well, look, this is one of the few ways we can make a living now. And I think in about 48 hours, it said, right, we've had a look at this, and the policy for the country now is changed, and people are covered under the public liability to go and teach.
That's
so
good.
Just a couple of examples.
Yeah, we needed that help as well. It was fairly brave undertaking that you took to. It could have gone one way or the other.
Certainly time consuming.
I'll bet. Yeah, I'll bet. And so what about teaching and some recording, Ensemble of the Golden Bough? What about those sorts of things?
Well, the Golden Bough that's something I've wanted to do for a very long time, but hadn't sort of felt that I had the resources to put it together in the way that I felt would be respecting the musicians who I wanted to come play. Because really we have some great musicians on it. I mean, Phil Kopp opens the album. So I wanted a record label in place, and I've had this PTC record label for about 4 or 5 years. I wanted distribution in place. I wanted the means to video to a decent level, even with just me there, and obviously I wanted to do the recording. I wanted to be able to source art from the UK, not graphic art, but oil paintings and graphite, that sort of thing. And once I'd had those things in place, the infrastructure really, I felt that it was time to try and put this thing together. And it's called Ensemble of the Golden Bough because it takes its name from the Golden Bough, which is a sort of, I suppose you call it an anthropology by Sir James Fraser, which came out at the end of the 19th century, and was really seminal in terms of its influence with people as far apart as Yeats and T.S. Eliot, and Benjamin Britten mentions it. And what it did is it looked at all of the world's sort of, from the shamanic traditions to the Greek myths to the to the Hindu Mahabharata, and to the Christian tradition as well, controversially, in exactly the same way. So what are the myths, what do they tell us about the human mind, the human experience? And I thought that this name was kind of perfect because that's exactly what I'd like to do, looking at our own culture. And there's another meaning as well, which is the Golden Bough is in Greek mythology. It's what? I always get the Greek names wrong. It'll come to me, but essentially it's your ticket into the underworld. Because it's curious how they thought of it. You could get into the underworld if you wanted, but you couldn't get out unless you passed through the gates of sleep. And so then you'd forget everything. So this ability to go into the underworld, you could break off a part of the Golden Bough, this tree, and then you would face certain trials, and then eventually when you get down to the underworld, you not only meet the people of the past, but the people of the future, and all of their knowledge was there. And then with the Golden Bough, you could pass again through the gates of sleep to the land of mortals. And I thought, well, this is essentially what music is in a funny way. Yeah. Because particularly classical music, I mean, you're playing a piece by somebody who's been dead 150 years, 200 years, and it's not like reading a history, even a really brilliant history, even a really evocative novel of the time. It's really direct gut experience. I mean, you really feel it, and all of a sudden you become aware of not just the historical context and the dates, but the feelings that these people had about life and the struggles that they were facing and overcoming, and sometimes failing to overcome. And I sort of felt that this is something we've maybe have lost a little bit when looking at our own culture. So you hear all the time about cultural appropriation, for instance, which is worth looking at, and I've been very conscious of that. How do you honor these other traditions? Is it right to take away from them? And I started to look and found that in poetry, people like Yeats and T.S. Eliot were taking very heavily from Eastern thought, and composers of the time like Frank Bridge, who's on the album, Percy Grainger to an extent, were very conscious also of this completely different modality of thinking that was coming into the UK as a result of really the first sort of worldwide technological revolution around the telegram and all those sorts of things. And I thought, well, that's funny. Here it is. We have lessons from our own culture about how you take from other different cultures and incorporate them into your own. And then I also found that some of this stuff you might hear about, like, it's all old white men. It's just a bunch of old white men. And you might group somebody like Yeats in, and then forget that actually, at the time he was involved in the brutal, hundreds-year-long struggle of Ireland for independence, and that, to group him in with somebody like Elgar, who I also love Elgar, was not helpful to understanding the situation at the time. In fact, probably positively unhelpful. And so I suppose what we're trying to do is to look at a curious combination of things that you see that is peculiarly British or English, which is the way that folk music, which is sort of inherently working class, has been incorporated into the high art. So Grainger, for instance, and Vaughan Williams, Cecil Sharp, of course, went round the countryside because this tradition of folk song was dying, it was going, and nobody had any record of it. And they took these sort of huge wax cylinder, or Percy Grainger anyway, recordings that he would go ply, some old 95-year-old guy sometimes in Lincolnshire at the pub with beer until he'd sing some of the songs, and there's a record of them. And you think that this person who's singing on these records may have lived, through the late stages of the Napoleonic Wars, and would be, and those folk songs talk about that. There's a record of that. But here's somebody who's very sort of slightly plummy and posh, Grainger, although he's from Australia, taking this sort of working class tradition that would have been completely lost, and then putting it within classical music, and we still play it to this day. But I also noticed that it's something that we really don't give much credit to. You hear Europeans often referring to what's that wonderful, hilarious phrase, I can't remember who said it, about Vaughan Williams' Fifth Symphony being, like staring at a cow for 45 minutes. Failing to understand that actually the reason, for one, that it sounds like film music is because it comes, the early films used this sort of music, but also because it was trying to incorporate the songs, these folk songs, and all the power that they had into a sort of archivable format, so that our future generations, us, the beneficiaries of this tradition, would still have them, would still have that knowledge and that power. So everything on this first album is either a new setting from those folk songs in the British Library, or it's a new setting for brass of a Frank Bridge or who else is on there? Percy Grainger. Yeah. And I suppose that we're really trying to look in a really grateful way at the tradition that we're all a part of. We're not trying to do anything new, but maybe a new thing now is to just look honestly at this tradition from the point of view of the people who lived at the time, and not from the point of view of our own assumptions about culture and ethics, and sort of trying to apply them. So that's the short answer.
Yeah. It's fascinating though. And when will people be able to hear all of that?
That's coming out in the middle of September, but you can hear the single Cherry Ripe is already up.
Amazing. Well, whilst we're talking about things that we like about the music industry and things that we like about our job, I'm going to go on to the next bank of questions for you. And I know I shouldn't have favourites, but these two are my favourite ones to ask.
Go for it.
So the first one is then, out of everything you've ever taken part in, have you got a best brass related memory or career highlight to date?
Well, that's a very tough question. But I did EUYO.
Oh, wow.
And I still dream regularly about it.
Yeah.
And I think being, I've been in concerts that were better. I've been in ensembles that you had, more powerful performances. But just in terms of the density of experience, sitting in the brass at the prom in 2010, doing Janacek, Taras Bulbo, 2013, and maybe it was, and having all the different traditions of Europe sort of represented all around me, both language and approach to playing, and that was probably the most influential, I could say. Don't know about the best.
It's interesting that you say that, because I'm pretty sure that Matt Lewis's answer was exactly the same.
Was it?
For a similar reason, just for how the performance felt. Not that it was the best performance he'd ever given or the best performance the orchestra had given, but for the overall atmosphere of the concert. It's really interesting. It's the same. Pretty sure it's the same orchestra. Don't quote me on that.
He did Gusamala, didn't he? Gusamala Youth Orchestra.
Might have been that then.
Because I remember
similar setup.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah.
We even ran into each other on the tour, I remember.
Okay. That's hilarious. So then the next question is my favourite one. And this one is to sum up in 3 words or 3 small phrases your worst or weirdest brass related memory. And the idea here is that nobody incriminates themselves too much, and we just get a snapshot into that memory of yours. So I always play the game fairly. I will give you my example one first, and
okay.
Mine is overhydration, Royal Festival Hall, which we are painfully close to right now, so the flashbacks are a little real, and no interval. And there are no follow-up questions, so whatever you tell me, we move straight on from.
Well, I was just thinking of how long the list for this question is compared to the first question. But, well, with classical gigs, you can be prepared, can't you? I mean, you generally know, you sort of know what's going to happen. You get in sessions, for instance, and it was just 3 words does that to be?
3 words or 3 small phrases.
Okay. Well, let me get down to it. Brass band in a club.
Mm-hmm.
No idea what you're about to play.
Mm-hmm.
Massive audience. No amplification. No hope. 90 minutes.
Well, like I say, there are no follow-up questions on air. I may ask you for the rest of the story later on.
Ask Patrick Kenny if you ever interview him.
Okay.
He'll tell you about it.
I'll store that one. And we'll move for now then swiftly on to what's the best piece of playing advice or feedback you think you've ever been given?
Breathe.
For brass playing or for being a human being? I
really think for both. I mean, I do quite a bit of Qigong and Tai Chi, that sort of stuff, and it's very much the same, but the focus on breathing, the really, really, on a basic level for your production is obviously very important, but actually understanding breathing I heard it put very well that you can't control your heartbeat. You can't just sing slowly, quickly. You can't control the, release of pectin from the liver or something, but you can breathe automatically and you can breathe manually. And so you can access the automatic processes of the body through breathing. So it's not just that it'll help your production, which it will, but it's not just that it'll help your circulation, which it will. It's not just that it will help your cognition, which it will. It's also that you can be sitting on stage so stressed and worried about an entrance that's coming up in 400 bars. Or is it 401? No, 404. It's either 404 or it's 400. That's I have no idea. I don't know. And you can use your breath to bring you into the fullness of the moment, almost slowing time down. So, you know, that bit of advice which all brass players, particularly tube players, receive about breathing, it's more than meets the eye.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good one. And it's a really nice way to think about it as well, as it's not just about how you play. Anyway, I make the joke that at one point I'm going to put all those pieces of advice into like a book, and it'll be like the Bold as Brass podcast self-help guide for brass players. So keep an eye out for that.
Do you know Wim Hof?
Yes, I am familiar with the method. So
he's broken down to 2 words, hasn't he? But I'm sure we can say them in the interview.
Absolutely, absolutely. So maybe this next question will be a little tricky for you to answer with all of the different genres and things in which you work. But have you got then a favourite piece to play?
That's a good question, actually. I think from the set repertoire for classical tuba players, the second movement of the Vaughan Williams is the thing that you're asked most to play. That is probably the best piece of music I think that we have to play. There's loads of other great, you know, pieces of music, but you don't get asked to play them that much. That's the only one I know where cellists will actually steal it.
Yeah.
We're stealing from other people. But I think anything that has anything with a good, strong melody, particularly pulling from folk traditions, I'm always very happy to play.
That's a good one. And so then on the flip side to this, is there a piece of music that exists in the world that you could happily put in the bin and never play again?
Well, it's funny, you know, because I was approached the other day after a concert and asked whether I thought about the cultural aspects of part of the performance. And I won't say the band, it's a very good band, and I know that the band leader is, you know, the London born and bred, and the band sort of encapsulates all of the wonderful, or many of the wonderful traditions that you hear in London. So there's reggae influences with Balkan influences. You know, there's drum and bass, there's funk. I mean, it's all in there. And this person approached me afterwards to ask me about it, because they'd slightly taken offence to one aspect of something the band leader was saying, which is taken from the sort of Rastafarian tradition, of which he's very knowledgeable. And I thought, I have thought about that, but I think as a freelance musician, the first thing you think when you get a piece of music is not, do I like it or not? But it's like you need to like, you have to find a way of delivering it. So even music which I would never like and probably wouldn't choose to listen to, I've sort of beguiled myself, if you like, into finding a way to present it to an audience. Because if you don't enjoy playing it, then you know they're not going to enjoy listening to it. So there's nothing I've played which I would necessarily just strike off.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough, and well reasoned. So we'll let you off that one. So the next question, I'm told, is the hardest one to answer. And so I apologise a little bit, but not too much, because I'm going to ask it anyway.
Waiting with bated breath.
This is in the enormous world of recordings that are available to us all nowadays. Is there one standout recording that you could recommend to any brass player of any level to listen to for inspiration?
Well, I'm trying to think of the things I still go back to Philip Jones' 20th Century album and Greatest Hits. You know, it's just, there's no better representation of what can be done on brass instruments within this tradition than you'll find on those 2 albums, which is a bit of a cop-out, but they're sort of kind of anthology albums, because they include the whole sort of everything that was on vinyl. So I'd say if you had to pick one, and it had to be brass, well, it'd have to be Philip Jones.
For sure, for sure. This is my chance to remind all of our listeners that we do have a Patreon page, and if you join as a subscriber, you do get access to a Spotify playlist with everybody's recommended recordings on. So I've literally found them all for you, put them in one place, and you can go and listen to stuff as eclectic as Baroque oboe through to heavy metal. There is literally something for everybody, so you don't have an excuse. So go and look it up. Yeah,
Donate.
Patreon.com/Boulder's Brass Podcast, or look us up on the app. And so, when you're not doing brass related things, then how do you enjoy spending the rest of your time?
I have a bit of trouble switching off, actually.
Okay.
I've been in a wonderful sort of relationship for the last year and a half, and it's been a good. Obviously, we're at home all of the time, and it's been an interesting. It's interesting to get somebody else's view on what my life is like, and I read a lot. I listen to a huge amount of music. I run, not as much as I should do at the moment, from how this suit is feeling, but I listen to a lot of audiobooks as well. But history is something that I've always been absolutely fascinated by, and I think essentially I don't really have any hobbies. It all goes back to music. But music in a particular, music and art in a particular sort of context, which is that I feel that musicians and artists generally, particularly classical musicians, have a responsibility to transfer from the past some of the most important information and deliver it to present generations in a way that is emotionally impactful, because it's such a dense form of communication, music. So I don't know if I have, some people are like really good at like golf or something, and maybe I should take up something like that, but I really just I read history and I think, oh, that's really interesting how that relates to this particular work by Mahler or Elgar, and I love poetry. I really like. I write some of my own poetry. I always look at it after a couple of years and think, wow, that's pretty bad. But I like the structure of it. So I really take. I'll take something by Keats or I really like Yeats and William Blake, and I memorize them and read them again and again and again until I have them sort of memorized, and I can go on a long walk and sort of say them to myself and just try and get into the mode of thinking that they might have been in a similar environment, and because I know that tradition of poetry, iambic pentameter with the rhyming couplets, blank verse, all those things which are so beautiful about our language and our culture, you also find in music in a way that you don't in other European traditions. Britain's setting of a folk song, Britain's setting of any number of older texts is unique. It's not the same approach as any European composer I'm aware of would take. So all those sorts of things, poetry, qigong, running, music, but really it all goes back to the same sort of thing. I don't need a break because I just love it all so much. Yeah,
and I think you've got enough variety with all the things that you do that it's okay for them to overlap and come back.
But I know lots about politics. I never know anything about sport though. I really find if I'm sort of in a pub sometimes, have you ever seen that IT Crowd episode where where they get the stock phrases?
Oh yeah.
From the night before. Did you see that Ludacris was playing last night? The problem with Manchester United is they always try and walk it in, and that will get into the conversation. I think I actually need something like that, because if it's not politics, which is always dangerous, and it's not history, which is a bit boring, I find myself sipping at the pint thinking, have I any connection to modern culture at all? No.
I think it's okay. We need people that are different.
It's a lonely road sometimes, but thank you.
So I like to round these off with a bit of a quick fire round, if you're game.
Do it.
So I definitely make this always sound much scarier than it is. The first question is dogs or cats?
Dogs.
City or country?
Country.
Would you rather be too hot or too cold?
Too cold.
Have you got a favourite comfort food?
I was going to say coffee.
Really?
Bangers and mash, I guess.
Oh, that's a good one. What about an alcoholic beverage of preference?
You're going to laugh at me, but cognac, actually.
Oh!
Not the expensive, just the Aldi stuff is fine, but over lockdown, I discovered it. It's amazing.
That's the sort of thing you definitely need in a venue like this.
That's true. What are we doing?
You should be on the chaise longue with your cognac and you'd be all set for the rest of the day. Okay, what about if you could wake up tomorrow able to play an instrument you can't already play, what would you like to be able to play?
Oh. I'd say piano, just because it would give you such a wide kind of understanding of everything else.
Yeah, piano is a popular answer to that question, so you're not alone there.
But if it was like if I forgot to play tuba at the same time, and it was like I had to switch, then maybe. I know I nearly started on clarinet. Let's say clarinet.
Oh, that's quite a good one. I do quite like a clarinet. If you could have a superpower, which one do you think you'd like?
Is telekinesis where you can move stuff?
Oh, I think so.
Or is that reading minds? No, telekinesis.
Yeah, that makes sense.
'Cause I'm incredibly lazy, and I could just sit around instead of just move the stuff, couldn't I?
Yeah, pretty handy.
Go for that.
Fair enough, that's a good one. So I'm going to finish off with the two fairly silly questions. I'm sure you've heard them. Strap in for these. The first one being, if you had to have an extra nose on your body, where do you think you'd put it?
An extra nose on my body. I think right in the top of my head. Although would it get quite sunburned?
Maybe, but you can sun cream your normal nose, so you can sun cream your extra nose.
That's true. Be inside a hat a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with the top of my head.
I like it. And so, if you were an animal, what sort of animal do you think you would be?
A blue whale.
Oh, that's a good one. Any reasoning with that one?
Well, you'd have all the... first of all, no one's going to mess with you, are they?
That is true, yeah.
Because most animals, it probably seems nice until you're being chased down by a pack of wolves or something, but no one's going to mess with the blue whale.
That is true.
But they've got that... they can sing, and they've got amazing ears. And apparently, I was reading this the other day, that there's a theory that whales and dolphins may actually have more emotional capacity, maybe more emotional intelligence than humans. So a combination of being sort of really amazing at music, I suppose, and communication through sound, and getting to swim around all the time, which seems pretty fun. And greater, understanding of emotions. I could do that for the next life.
That sounds great. So, Chris, I've come to the end of all of my questions for you. Now, if people want to find out more about you and all the things that you do, where can they find out about them?
I think, for now, I'd say Ensemble of the goldenbough.com, actually, because that's really the thing we're focusing on. And, that leads into a lot of the other... We're doing Golden Bough publishing, so we're publishing each piece that we do to keep that available and add it to the brass tradition. And then you'll also run into these other musicians who you love and admire so much: Ryan Linham, Sam Kinraid, Rory Cartmel on trombone, Philippa Slack, Jonathan Healy, the composer, and Rory Simmons, the composer. And you can kind of access a world that we spend a huge amount of time building, and we'll continue to build, and that's one of the most exciting things I'm involved in right now. But you can also go to my website, barrettchristopher.com.
Perfect. We'll include everything for everyone to find all of those things. Chris, thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for coming down, and thanks to Studio 1901 as well.
Yes,
really
huge thanks to them.